Hey there. Thank you for joining me, Stanley, this Saturday. I know it's kind of late, but I still wanted to be able to have this chance to talk to you guys. Last week, I talked some about how you end up just drifting and what that drift kind of looks like for a lot of us. Um, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. And this week, I kind of wanted to go with this scale that I think we all generally have in our mind, because we all do have a scale of like how good or bad someone is, and um, on the end of how good someone is, you have the most wonderful, amazingly good people like Mother Teresa. Um, there's a gentleman named George Muller. He started an orphanage, helped thousands of orphans at a time when orphans weren't really being served. The likes of William Wilberforce, who ended the slave trade. These just incredible examples of what it means to be a good human being. And then on the other end, you have the most horrible people you can imagine. The likes of Adolf Hitler, the likes of Jeffrey Dahmer, or other serial killers like that. Just the most horrific, wicked people you could think of. And for most of us, you have people who are that good off kind of in a box on one end, and you have the people who are that bad off in a box on the other end. And then you have some average person in the middle. And you would say that generally everyone's going to fall somewhere on this scale. And while there are the two extremes, almost everyone falls somewhere near the middle. And there's a lot of problems with this scale. First of all, what is an average person like? Everyone differs in describing an average person. How good is that person? How bad is that person? If you're among a lot of really good people, your thoughts of what an average human person is like will probably be a lot higher. If you're around a lot of bad people, it's probably a little bit lower. And coming up with an actual description is going to be very hard. And then there's also the fact that I think it's over 70% of people who were surveyed will respond by saying that they are better than average. Let me repeat that. Over 70% of people, when asked, will say that they are better than average. But average is supposed to be right in the middle. And so either we have a really terrible idea of average, or there are a lot of people who don't really know where they fall. And another really big problem, what I think might cause more of us problems, is that when we create this scale, a lot of times you just kind of get placed there. And it's almost like, well, that's where you're at. That's just who you are. And there's not a good way to move between the different groups, the different categories. However you categorize it, it's just kind of, well, you're stuck in that slot. Last time we talked some about how we drift, and if we drift, we tend to drift to the negative. We'll always drift to the negative. You don't become a better person by letting yourself just drift. But there's a lot that goes into how good or bad someone is. And to be fair, the things that go into those incredibly good people and the things that go into those awful people aren't fully within our control. There's a lot that they didn't have any say over, like the families that they're born into, the way that they're raised, the experiences that they have happened to them. Really positive experiences make it a lot more likely that you'll be one of those really good people, and really negative experiences, very traumatic experiences, make it likely you could be one of those really bad people. And certainly there are people with good experiences who end up becoming not a great person, and there are people with traumatic experiences who do become good people, but that's just what happens. Is there are a lot of influences that open up the very, very, very bad end for some people, and there are experiences that open up the incredibly good end for people that are out of our control. But there are things that are within our control. studies have shown that you generally will become like the 5 people that you're closest to. And so if you surround yourself with really bad people, you're not going to be a great person. But if you try to take some time and surround yourself with good people, they can help make you better. You're going to become like the media that you consume. So if all that you're doing is sitting at home and you're watching the news and it's just making you really negative and really upset, especially if you're watching one of the news sources that is much more politicized and much more polarized, and they are shouting and very focused not on reporting facts, but on uh, shouting out their political opinion and ridiculing anyone who disagrees, you're not going to become a very good person. If you watch just really terrible shows that teach awful morals, that don't have good role models, that are geared toward not being a great thing, then you're not going to be made better by doing that. And the same is true for the things you listen to, the things that you read. And this isn't to say that, every once in a while, you don't just pick up. I've talked about how, like, every once in a while, I will just pick up a fun book. And it's just fun. It's not, this great book that's meant to make me a lot better. And I mean, the same can be true for TV, but we do have to be careful. We have to watch if it's having an impact on you. And if you're watching a TV show or YouTube videos that are having a negative impact on you, that are making you think in ways and act in ways that you normally wouldn't, then you need to stop. But at the same time, you can watch things that generally make you better. You can listen to things that generally make you better. You can read things that make you a better person. The things that you take in will greatly change all of this. And if you drift, you are going to drift toward the negative. But the choices that you make, the actions that you make will push you one direction or another. And so if you make one good choice, it makes it easier to make the second one, and then the next one, and then the next one. But if you make one bad choice, it makes it easier to make the second one, and then the next one, and then the next one. Now, there is a very clear Christian understanding of what's at play here. And I do want to say that this is a Christian perspective on how good and evil works. And it might, up until this point, not be solely a Christian perspective, but with where I go to from here, this is a Christian perspective. So you have that drift toward doing what's bad. Christians call that sin. And while sin is often talked about as the actual choices we make, there's also sin that just has us bent the wrong way. And we do drift, and when we drift, we are going to drift toward becoming worse people. But one decision that you make that not only is a decision to move toward becoming a better person, but also completely changes the scale, is the decision to accept Jesus and the work that Jesus does for you. It completely resets the scale. There are people who went down and they were going on a very negative path, and when they accepted Jesus, it completely reset where they were and completely changed where they're at. And Jesus enables us to become better people even than our choices could make us, because, like I said, 70% of people would say that they're better than average. But the people who I named, who were the great, as far good as you could be, Mother Teresa, George Muller, William Wilberforce, all of them were Christians. And that's not to say that you have to be a Christian or you have to be someone who believes in Jesus to make it to near that end of the scale. There are wonderful people who we see and we admire who were not Christians. But I fully believe that The only way to truly be transformed into someone who is like Jesus, who is the very far end of the scale. It gets no better than Jesus. If you want to get as close to that end as you can, you are at some point going to have to accept Jesus and his work for you. But here's what I want us to think about through the rest of this week. I would encourage you to think about, how have you looked at this scale, and probably how have you kind of skewed it? And I want you to think about your choices. What are the things that are in your control that are making you go more to the negative? What are the things that are in your control that maybe are going to help you go to the positive? What are some things that you can do this week that can move you away from the negative over toward the positive? Because I think all of us want to be, almost everyone who's alive wants to be the best person they can be. There is no one that I know of who sets out in a day thinking, well, I'm just going to be a terrible person today. But sometimes we are. That's just the truth of it. But I do think it's important for us to say, how can I use this idea of a scale to my advantage? How can I say, okay, how am I going to be less like these really bad people who I don't want to be like, and more like the really positive examples? So I would encourage you, try to think through this. We're going to dive even further into this next week. We are going to things are going to get weird at some point. Okay, I studied this for my undergraduate degree. My undergraduate degree thesis paper got weird. And it will get weird. But that's still a week or two ahead. We'll see where these videos take us. But for now, just try to think about some steps that you could take to help make yourself a bit better person this next week. Like I said, as a Christian, I do believe the single most important thing you can do is look at Jesus and say, that is the example of a human who's got it all right. And give your life to trying to become more like him and trying to get closer to him. But we'll get into more of all of that in the weeks to come. For now, God bless you. Take care.